Hey, 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 we are live today. Hey, 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 we are live today. Good morning. It is time for the weekly quilt chat with True Blue Quilts. I am so glad to see you here every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific. We are just gathering for an informal quilt chat. I've got a couple questions that came in that I'd like to answer. And of course, I am not the be all end all quilt expert. I just share my opinions. Everybody's got them, and I am happy to share. Let me first introduce the quilt behind me. This is 2x2, and it is one of the patterns in my book, Angle Play the Easy Way. Angle Play is a set of specially designed templates that help you create these half rectangle triangles quickly and easily with accurate measurements and points without all sorts of mental math and strange placement of pieces. You just put your fabrics together and trim around the template, and it gives you beautiful results. And I love the pop of color and interest that you can make when you switch from using half square triangles to half rectangle triangles. So lots of design options. Angle Play is one of my favorite design tools to use when I am designing new quilts. So let's dive right into the questions today. Actually, before I get to the questions, I'm going to put that book name in the comments. And I always have problems talking and typing at the same time. So if you excuse me for just a second. You can always find books and patterns at truebluequilts.com. Okay, so our first question that tends to confuse new quilters or our family members that may hear those random bits of quilt conversation is, what is a fat quarter? Everybody's talking about these fat quarters, and what does that mean? You go into a store and you see little bits of fabric. They could be folded. Sometimes they're bundled up. I've got a bundle here, a stack of fat quarters. They could be folded in pretty little triangles or something. But a fat quarter refers to a quarter yard of fabric. So we need to talk a little bit about the math. So we know a yard is 36 inches. Half a yard is 18 inches. So a quarter yard is 9 inches. Well, a fat quarter means that they took, instead of one long skinny piece from the yard of fabric, they took two and cut them off at the half yard space. So unfolding this fat quarter, you get a single layer of fabric that is 18 by 22. Ideally, you would have 18 inches by 22 inches. Fabric is, or 21, I say 22, 21, because we generally work with width of fabric is 42 inches. So if you cut that in half, it's 21, and then you've gone the half yard. So if we took our quarter yard piece off the bolt and put it side by side, that creates the fat quarter. Some shops may cut fat eighths. So same concept, instead of taking that 4.5 inches, eighth of a yard measurement, they've made it 9 inches by that 21, and just cut along the fold where the fabric comes off the bolt. So basic unit. This is considered a pre-cut because it came off the bolt. The fabric store has pre-cut that unit for you. And a lot of patterns are written specifically for fat quarters because it's just a great way to get a variety of fabrics. You can collect certain colors. You can get, when you see them in the bundles, you can get a little bit of every print in a collection to work with. And that's a lot of fun. So it's a really useful unit when you put quilts together. The problem, not really a problem, but something to consider when you are working with fat quarters is that it takes quite a few to make a full quilt top. You can't just get 3 or 4 fat quarters and make a quilt, because a baby quilt requires several yards of fabric. So that's at least 8 of these fat quarters. And the more seams you put in, the more fabric you need. So, really intricate quilts, it's not unusual to see that you need, 10 yards of fabric just for the front of the quilt. So I love shopping for fat quarters. I always pick up a few. They're like potato chips. You just can't have one. So lots of fun to play with fat quarters. Let me know if you are a fat quarter quilter. Okay, so that was our first question, was about fat quarters. And our second question, someone asked about table runners and batting. And I see this question a lot online. I have a table runner here. This is a holiday table runner that's listed in my Etsy shop. So if you didn't want to make one yourself, you can search Etsy, lots of handmade quilt items for sale. And you can see this is a fairly thin batting. But yes, I always put batting in my small projects, placemats, table runners, wall hangings, that kind of thing. Batting comes in a lot of different thicknesses. So plus I live in the desert, so I'm not making quilts because I need a lot of warmth in the winter. And decorative items, you don't want a lot of bulky puffiness. So if you're looking for that lofty, really puffy quilt, you're going to look for polyester blend battings because polyester gives us that high loft. I tend to go for thin cotton battings. And again, you can get various thicknesses. So just do a little bit of research, ask at your quilt shop, look at the packaging, and it'll say the different ranges of battings. For many, many years, I used Quilter's Dream cotton batting in the Request and Select. Those were the thinner options. And so those are good choices for table runner and placemats, are those thin cotton battings. For tabletop projects, if something's specifically going to be used in the kitchen, you can find products such as Insole Bright, which is it has those heat resistant fibers that you see in hot pads and trivets. So it protects the surfaces. So you can also look for those, and you will want to do shopping for that either online or at a quilt specialty shop, a store that provides fabric for quilting. And they generally have knowledgeable staff that can guide you to some of those specialty linings for things. If you are making items for the kitchen, make sure that you check the packaging, and for microwave safe, we don't want to throw anything in the microwave that has some of those metallic fibers that might help with the heat resistance and stuff. We don't want to catch anybody on fire. So just be really mindful of the materials that you are using in any situation that could be around a flame or heat there, because we want to be safe while we quilt. So yes, I do put batting in my table runners. I just keep it on the small side. And I want to say good morning to Sue. She's one of my fellow fat quarter addicts. So good to see you and have you here with us today. If any of my comments spark further questions, just drop them in the comments and we can do a follow-up round as well. So in addition to fat quarters and batting, I have seen a lot of comments about people asking about backings, fleece, flannel, sheets, all those type of things. I am a pretty traditional basic quilter, I guess, in terms of the materials I use. So I always look for cotton backing at my fabric store. And since I am a long arm quilter, I like to get the extra wide backings so that I have just one full piece of fabric on the back of my quilts. So if you are working with a long arm quilter, make sure you talk to them ahead of time as to what kind of backings they prefer. It may save you a headache later when you take your quilt to be finished and there are, extra steps before the quilter can get started. One thing that I have personally noticed is that when you purchase those 108-inch wide backings, they tend to shrink a little bit more than the smaller cuts, the traditional 45-inch yardage. So pre-wash is a must for backing. So make sure you do that. You don't want your top and your back to shrink at different rates. It will create all sorts of crazy puckers in the quilt when it is finished. So then we move on to those other items. I have not personally used fleece as a backing, just those fleece blankets that I see them a lot at Joann's, and they're really fun to just clip the edges and tie the knots and just have a single layer blanket. It's great to keep in the car if you're out late at a football game or, some event, especially with kids that want those extra layers. I even throw a blanket or a shawl in my car in the summer and take it into the movie theater, back in the day, pre-2020, when we could go to movies, because they cranked the air conditioning down so low that I would always get cold in the movie theater. So I just walk in with my blanket or shawl. So sometimes those single layers are good. Flannel works the same way as those wide backs. I've used flannel on the back of quilts. Even if the top is regular cotton, I have no problem putting that soft flannel on the back, just pre-wash, because flannel does shrink at a different rate than basic quilting cotton. And then there is the popular, this was one of my daughter's favorite blankets as a kid. It has this cute little baby fairy print, and this is flannel, so it's nice and soft. And then, ooh, that minky or that cuddle, that almost velour fabric is so great to cuddle in. And we put that on the back. Now, minky or any of these plush type fabrics are they can be a pain to work with because they shed. All those extra fibers are going to get everywhere. So make sure that you've emptied your vacuum cleaner filter and then be ready to vacuum all that stuff up because minky provides a great result. The process is just a little bit messy. The other thing to keep in mind when you put minky on something is that it may beard and show up on the front side of your project. This has been thrown in the wash enough that it's all gone. And if I had any purple showing through on the top, it wouldn't be a big deal because that kind of goes with the colors on this. But I remember a few years ago, I was working on a Christmas quilt for a friend, and the front was all, white, gray, winter scenes. And the back was a red minky, and the red poked through, and it really detracted from the piecing on the front of the quilt. So we changed out the backing for something else. So just be aware that sometimes you're going to get those pokies and that bearding if you have a really fluffy flannel or minky or cuddle or any of those type of fabrics, that they may poke through and show on the top of your quilt when you get it quilted. Of course, that will be reduced after washing, because the holes from the needle will close up in the wash, and that fuzziness, kind of wears away a little bit, or at least softens in the wash. So like I said, just be aware of the consequences of your choices. So it's not to say it can't be done. And Sue's asking about batting with Minky. I've done it both ways. Sometimes I use batting, sometimes I don't. Like, this is a purely 2-layer project. So, there's no batting in there. It's just the 2 layers, and really simple. We just turned and then sewn 1/4 of an inch around the edges, and then a simple cross hatch across the center, and you're good to go for a child's utility quilt. So great questions about fat quarters and batting and backings, different materials for backings. My general thought is, it's your quilt. You can do what you want. There are some purists who only use, cotton, quilting cotton fabric for their front and their back. There are some people that like to get vintage sheets and use that. I have done that only once or twice. No major issues in that. But again, the weave of those fabrics may be a little different, and so there might be a noticeable texture difference. I don't know that it's enough to really make a difference in anything. Obviously, thinner fabrics may wear through faster. So it's all up to you and your personal budget, your personal preferences. There is a huge wide world of choices when we quilt. And so I just encourage you to do what you like what you do, and let's all have some fun. So if you have any more questions about quilting, please drop in the comments or send me an email. You can find me at info@truebluequilts.com. I will be back next Tuesday with another quilt chat. Have a great week.